All right, let's dive into this. Ralph Waldo Trine's character building thought power. This one's been on my list for a while, and I gotta say, even just skimming it, I'm already hooked. It's almost like he had a time machine and wrote a self-help book for like the modern
It
reader.
really is amazing how relevant his work still feels today. I mean,
It's like,
written over 100 years ago, right?
yeah.
But he was tapping into something really timeless, this whole idea that we're not just, puppets of fate. We actually have a say in creating our reality.
And that's really the core of what we're exploring here, isn't it? How our thoughts become actions, how those actions solidify into habits and shape our character, and ultimately how that all leads to the kind of life we experience. Like, is it really all about mindset?
In a lot of ways, yeah, I think Trine would argue that it absolutely starts with thought.
Mhm.
He uses this great analogy, compares it to building a house. You wouldn't just start slapping bricks together without a blueprint, right?
Okay, that makes sense. So, before we even lift a finger, we got to have that mental image, that vision of what we're trying to build, whether it's a house or a life.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting, because then he goes on to talk about this principle, the law of repetition, which applies to both physical actions and e-thoughts.
So, like, the more we do something, the easier it becomes. But that doesn't just mean practicing piano scales. It also means that what dwelling on certain thoughts makes them more powerful.
Precisely. It's almost like training a muscle. At first, trying to consciously control your thoughts might feel super awkward, even frustrating. But with consistent effort, that mental muscle gets stronger, more flexible.
Okay, so even if I'm not used to, directing my thoughts, there's hope for me yet. I can actually train my mind to, let's say, focus on the positive more often.
Absolutely. And to illustrate this point, Trent brings up some compelling examples. He talks about this cashier, really gets caught up in this idea of getting rich quick through speculation.
Oh, I think I remember this one. It doesn't end well for the cashier, does it?
Nope. By constantly dwelling on that get rich quick thought, he ends up, well, making some pretty disastrous choices.
Which kind of makes sense, right? It's like the more we give airtime to a thought, the bigger it gets, the more it influences us, whether it's a helpful thought or a harmful one.
Definitely. And to highlight the contrast, he then brings in this story of a widow who faces incredible hardship after losing her husband. But instead of falling into despair, she chooses to focus on what she does have, what she can be grateful for, and starts taking action to build a new life.
That's a powerful example. It shows that even when things are rough, our thoughts can still play a huge role in how we experience those challenges, how we react to them.
Absolutely. And, Twain acknowledges that we all have negative thoughts. It's human nature, right?
Hmm.
But he offers a strategy for dealing with them, calls it the law of indirectness.
The law of indirectness. So are we talking about like positive affirmations, battling those negative thoughts head on?
It's more about, instead of trying to suppress those negative thoughts directly, we shift our focus, we cultivate positive thoughts and goals.
So it's not about, pretending everything's perfect. It's more like choosing to water the flowers instead of focusing on the weeds. Makes sense to me. Now, can you give an example of what that might look like in practice?
Sure. Let's say you're feeling anxious about, I don't know, a big presentation at work. Instead of getting stuck in that fear of failure, you could maybe visualize yourself delivering a confident, engaging presentation.
Right. Like focus on the ideal outcome, not the potential disaster.
Exactly. And by shifting your attention that way, you weaken the grip of that negative thought, make room for something more empowering.
I like it. It's not about denying the challenge. It's about finding a more constructive way to approach it. And this ties into, was it Trine's concept of the rounding up of life? He used that tree analogy, right?
Yeah. Remember the grafted tree.
Honestly, that one's a bit fuzzy for me. Can you refresh my memory?
So picture a tree that's been grafted with like a different variety of fruit. As that tree grows, the characteristics of that grafted branch become more and more obvious.
Gotcha. So it's like our dominant thoughts and habits, they become more visible as we get older. Like they're part of who we are, they're bearing fruit.
Exactly. And Trine's point is we get to choose what kind of fruit that will be based on the seeds we've planted throughout our lives.
That's a powerful image. So it's like our inner world is constantly shaping our outer world. We're not just reacting, we're creating. But what about, the role of upbringing, genetics, all that? Does Trine believe we're just products of our environment and our DNA?
That's where things get really interesting. He talks about heredity versus self-mastery, and it's actually pretty empowering. He believed that, yeah, our genes and our upbringing, they definitely play a part. They influence us. But he didn't think they, like, totally define us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He argued that it's our true self, our spirit. It
Mm.
has this power to kind of rise above those limitations.
So it's not about like pretending our past doesn't exist, but recognizing that we're not trapped by it, that we have the power to choose a different path if we want to.
Exactly. It's almost like we've been handed this rough sketch,
Mm.
but we have the freedom to fill in the details, make it our own,
Yeah.
create our own masterpiece.
Now that is a thought. It means we can break free from those negative patterns, even the ones that have been there like forever. It's really empowering.
And that brings us right back to the power of thought. Try and believe that each thought we have, each and every one, it's a force. It's shaping not just our inner world, but also the reality we experience out there. He compared it to a magnet attracting iron filings.
Okay, so hold on. If I'm constantly thinking about, not having enough, always feeling like I'm lacking, does that mean I'm actually attracting more of that into my life? That's kind of scary.
It can be, yeah.
Uh,
But it also highlights the power we have to, well, to shape things for the better. If we focus on abundance gratitude, we're more likely to find those things in our experience. It's not about denying challenges, but like shifting our perspective, our energy.
this is reminding me of that whole law of attraction thing. It's all about aligning our thoughts, beliefs with what we want to create.
Absolutely. Trine was way ahead of his time in a lot of ways. His work really resonates with a lot of what we hear today about mindfulness, positive psychology.
So, okay, let's say we buy into this whole idea that our thoughts create our reality. How do we actually start to change those thought patterns? Do we just like sit around thinking positive thoughts all day?
It's not quite that easy, but it does begin with awareness. Trine was a big believer in taking time for quiet reflection, stepping back from the craziness of daily life, connecting with that inner self.
So, before we can even think about changing our thoughts, we need to become aware of what those thoughts actually are.
Exactly. It's like, imagine you're trying to tidy up a really cluttered room. You can't really start organizing until you know what you're dealing with. Trine called this making a conscious connection with the infinite.
Whenever we talk about the infinite, it can sound a bit out there mystical. Can you break that down for us? How does that apply to like our everyday lives?
He believed that we all have access to this higher source of wisdom and power within ourselves. You could call it your higher self, intuition, your connection to something bigger, whatever resonates with you. It's about tapping into something that's, well, beyond that limited ego.
Okay, so we're taking some quiet time each day to reflect, to connect that inner wisdom. But what do we actually do during that time?
Trine recommended focusing on our ideals, visualizing the life we want, cultivating those feelings of gratitude and peace. He was also a big proponent of affirmations, those positive statements that reinforce our desired beliefs.
So it's not just about clearing our minds, it's about actively planting those seeds, the seeds of the character and the life we want to grow.
Exactly. And don't forget that law of repetition. The more we practice these things, the more natural they become. It's like creating a path in the forest of our minds. The more we walk it, the easier it gets.
Okay, but what about those really stubborn thoughts? The ones that just won't quit, no matter how hard we try. Is willpower enough?
That's where connecting with the infinite can be a game changer. Try and believe that by aligning ourselves with something bigger, something beyond ourselves, we could access strength beyond our own, limited perspective. He described it as drawing upon the inexhaustible reservoir of wisdom, power, and love that resides within each of us.
So it's not just about gritting our teeth and powering through, it's about tapping into a source of support that can help us overcome those inner obstacles.
Exactly. Think of it like trying to move a giant boulder. You could strain and struggle all on your own. Or you could use a lever, something to amplify your strength. Connecting with the infinite is like finding that lever. It helps us move beyond those limitations and achieve things we might not have thought possible.
I'm really starting to see how this whole idea of thought power can change how we approach life. It's not something that just happens to us, it's something we're actively creating. That's pretty radical, isn't it?
It definitely was a revolutionary idea back then, and it still challenges us today to really step into that role of conscious creators.
So if there was one thought, just one, that we could start focusing on today to build a better tomorrow, what would you say Trine would suggest?
I think he'd encourage us to choose a thought that really reflects our highest ideal, something that inspires us, something that fills us with hope and purpose. Maybe it's a simple affirmation like, I am worthy of love and happiness, Or maybe it's a more concrete vision of the life we want to create.
It's like planting that seed of intention, nurturing it with positive thoughts and actions, and then watching it bloom into the life we want to live. But what about when life throws us a curveball, something totally unexpected, out of our control? Can our thoughts really make a difference in those situations?
Now, that's a question that's been around forever, hasn't it? Try and acknowledge that, yeah, we don't always have control over external events, but he was adamant that we always have control over our response.
So it's not about pretending bad things don't happen, it's about choosing how we react to them.
Exactly. He used the example of that woman, the one who lost her husband, remember? Left with a farm to pay off, a family to take care of. Instead of giving in to despair, she chose to face it all with courage and faith.
It's amazing how she not only survived, but thrived, found a way to be grateful even in the midst of struggle. But how do we cultivate that kind of resilience, especially when we're feeling overwhelmed?
Trine believed it starts with recognizing our true nature. He said that we're not just our bodies, our emotions, not even our thoughts. We're something more, something eternal and unchanging. We're something deeper, something that can handle anything life throws at us.
That's a really comforting thought, to know that there's this part of us, this core that's unshakable.
It is. And that's where true strength comes from. That
Yeah.
ability to bounce back no matter what. Try and call this deeper self, the essential individual, the part of us that's connected to that infinite source of life.
The infinite, again, it keeps popping up. So how do we actually connect with this infinite part of ourselves, especially when we're feeling kind of lost, disconnected?
Well, Trend was a big believer in practices like meditation prayer, spending time in nature. He saw these as ways to quiet the mind, tune out the noise and connect with a deeper sense of peace and purpose.
It's like hitting the reset button, taking a break from the chaos of the world and tuning into our own inner wisdom.
Exactly. It's like, imagine you've been stuck in a busy city for days, surrounded by noise and crowds, and then suddenly you're walking through a peaceful forest. You can breathe again. You start to notice the beauty, the stillness that was always there, but hidden beneath the surface.
I love that analogy. It's so true. It's like we forget that stillness exists until we actually experience it. So by connecting with this deeper part of ourselves, we can tap into a source of strength that helps us get through tough times.
Absolutely. It's not about denying the reality of our experiences, whether they're good or bad. It's about finding that inner peace, that acceptance within ourselves.
This is all reminding me of mindfulness practices, being present in the moment, accepting things as they are, finding that sense of calm amidst all the craziness.
You're spot on. Trine was ahead of his time in so many ways. He really understood that true happiness, it doesn't come from stuff or achievements. It comes from within, from that deep connection with ourselves and with something bigger.
It's a powerful message. We're not just victims of fate, we're active participants in creating our own reality. And by mastering our thoughts, connecting with our inner wisdom, aligning ourselves with a higher purpose, well, we can actually shape our own destiny.
And that's the heart of what Trine was trying to convey in character-building thought power. It's a call to action, an invitation to step into our full potential as conscious creators of our lives.
So for everyone listening, I want to leave you with a question to ponder. As you go about your day, what one small step can you take today to cultivate a more positive mindset? Maybe it's starting a gratitude practice, spending a few minutes in quiet reflection, or simply choosing to focus on the good things in your life.
Remember, even the tiniest actions can have a ripple effect. Like Trine said, every act, every thought is a seed sown which will surely sprout and grow and bear fruit, either of peace and blessedness or of discord and unrest.
And on that note, we'll leave you with one last thought from Trine, something to carry with you. He said, "Life is not a vale of tears, but a symphony of joy. Let us attune our hearts to its music and join in its grand chorus." Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the power of thought. We'll see you next time.